Okay, thanks, Ram. Uh, Hi, guys. Hope I am visible to everyone now. So, uh, today's topic is basically how to learn a programming language. So, basically, how I got into this program is basically I am already a part of IEEE student branch when I was in college, and afterwards I just a second. The volume is echoing here. Cool. So, after a while, during our IEEE days, we used to do a lot of uh, tech talks. We used to bring people from the industry. So IEEE actually provided a really good platform for me to learn a lot of stuff during my college days. And now today I'm actually happy to be here because another IEEE student branch actually invited me. Basically, I also started as an IEEE student branch member. So thanks, Ram. Thanks for the opportunity, and also thanks to your student branch. And this topic is also something that many people have asked me personally. So whenever I go to some college, whenever I go to some school, first thing the teachers and students everything ask is, how do you guys actually learn a programming language? So we are on tech industry, we actually on an average we are able to learn any programming language within a day or two. So if we just sit down for a day, we just start doing stuff, immediately in the next day we are actually doing actual projects in that new language. So how does this happen? What's actually behind this programming process is something people wanted to know, and that's why I also chose that as topic for today's online webinar. So right now people are in lockdown. I guess everyone's staying safe. Stay safe with your loved ones. So the idea behind today's talk is, see, you guys are in lockdown, so I hope you will all have a lot of time in your hands to actually try this stuff. So to learn a programming language is basically mm, starts with the question, who should actually code? So I have seen a lot of people asking this question. Some people are like, I am from a non-tech branch, I am from bio medical engineering, there is no reason for me to code. So that's actually a big misconception people have. So you know the current COVID crisis. So people are actually rushing to find vaccines. People are actually struggling to. Doctors are really struggling to treat patients. So if you look at the actual vaccine creation process, almost 90% of them are basically written as computer programs. So they code this virus genome into a program to see which gene actually matches that specific virus. So if there's an actual vaccine, they write a program for that vaccine. They also create a program for the virus, and they compare if the virus DNA can be treated by that specific vaccine. So if you recently they are also conducted a machine learning competition where people used the vaccination code data from past medical treatments to actually see which medicine works well on COVID-19. So you can actually go and check this video on YouTube. People are actually finding medicines with code. And take Tesla for example. So Tesla is a automobile manufacturer. They recently released a software update that basically increased their car's speed. So they pushed a software update and they basically boosted the car's traveling speed. So Tesla is a hardware company which has some really good software. Their cars are self-driving. They are also doing some uh, innovations with electric engineering. So it's not like you're from a medical department, you're from a non-circuit branch, you don't have to code. The thing is, in today's generation, everyone will have to code. And if you don't code, which means you won't grow up. So once you enter an industry, you go to a job and you will be stuck at the job forever, unless you upskill yourself and you actually learn to innovate. So Ford Motors, they were a really good car company. Ford Motors, I was a big fan of Ford Mustang and everything. But the thing is, their cars are not smart. So when Tesla walked into the market, they basically took the entire market because their cars were smart. Their cars can think, their cars can drive themselves, their cars can receive software updates. Their cars featured a 24-inch touchscreen uh, that lets them install apps, that lets them use music. So basically, a new car manufacturer just walked in and took over the entire industry. So that's how powerful programming in any industry can be. So SpaceX, again, it's a really good example where the rockets land themselves. So these SpaceX rockets, they are really smart. They go out of the Earth's environment and they come back, land themselves, completely autonomous through machine learning. So in our generation, you should always say, I should code, not who should code. Whatever industry you are working in, whether you are an artist, whether you are a scientist, whether you are working in medical, whether you are working in electrical, one way or another, unless you learn to code, it's really difficult to grow up in current technology. So with that aside, let me introduce myself. I am Danny Akash, and I am a JavaScript developer who works on building cool applications. So I don't introduce myself as uh, software engineer, MTS level 1. It's not a good intro. I like to introduce myself as an application developer, a simple developer who loves to build cool applications. And I'm also a big fan of science. So this is my site, dannyakash.com. You can actually go there, connect with me. I have added all my social links there. And if you are a big anime fan, I have provided my MyAnimeList profile. You can just send a request there. Cool. Now back to our question: how to actually learn one? So, like I said, many people will be wondering, yeah, people are doing some awesome stuff with programming. They are building rockets, they are sending cars, they are finding vaccine. But how do I start? Where do I actually start if I want to reach that level? So, let's take it a step by step. So, first, before we even go into the steps, how to choose a language. So many people are career minded people, so people already know that there are languages like Java, Python, etc., etc. Those people here from industry, they think, okay, there are like several openings for Python, then I should learn Python. There are like huge openings for JavaScript, I should learn JavaScript. And recently Kotlin came out and people are like, I need to learn Kotlin. Why do you need to learn Kotlin, bro? That's the question I generally ask. They were like, I heard there are a lot of openings for Kotlin though, so I have to learn Kotlin. And that's again one of the few misconceptions people have. So there are technically no openings for languages. There are openings for building products. So people think by learning a language they're getting a job. No, by building a product we actually get a job. That's how the tech industry actually works. So let me show you. Every language has its own advantages and disadvantages, and every language specializes in something, some not specialize in something. So let's say it's entirely based on the work you want to do. Let's say if you want to build some apps, you actually just finished college, you actually looking for a way to build some Android or iOS app, or you want to build a nice web application. For example, you want to build your own portfolio. So in that scenario, what you need is, you need JavaScript, because JavaScript is a language that runs on the web, and almost all the mobile apps these days are built using JavaScript frameworks like Ionic and React Native. So companies who tend to work on building such products, they actually try to hire more JavaScript developers, people who are really versed in JavaScript. Then what if you want to do machine learning and data science? So this is also completely a product requirement. So say you are working for some tech giant like Facebook and Google. So there they collect data in levels of millions. So every second they have millions of data flowing in, and they are always finding way to increase their revenue. So how do they increase their revenue? So you have a shopping page in Facebook and you know a guy who shops a lot. So what you need to do is, you need to connect that shopping page to the guy who shops a lot. So this is where data science come in. We read the data, we interpret which category of people belong in which region and how to deliver the proper ads to them. Then I am actually a guy who watches a lot of science and tech videos, which means YouTube can actually suggest me more tech videos, and I am more likely to click on tech videos than other categories. So this is where machine learning comes in. So what machine learning comes in, it does is, it takes the data from the data science platform, and it creates a recommendation engine customized for Danny, for me, and it starts showing me all these kind of tech related videos. So if you are interested in such work, the language I'd recommend is go for Python. So Python is as a huge set of machine learning and data science libraries, and it's also a language that's relatively easier to learn. What about next category? System administrators or network administrators, to be precise. You are working for a company that has a large distributed network of systems. For example, say you are working with some chat provider like Slack or Zoom or Cisco WebEx, the current conference call that we are on. So if you are working in tools like this, if you want to work for tools like this, which means you need to work with the network layer. And there are languages that specialize well in this network layer. So you will have to learn a language called Go. Go is a language built by Google, and it's one of the most widely used network management language out there. Sorry, not network management, network system management language. Then, if you want to build powerful system softwares in the level, if you want to build Firefox, for example, if you want to build a new web browser, then you need a language like Rust. So Rust is basically modern C++. It's a language that's used to build softwares as solid as the old C++ standards, and it's really good in terms of memory management. We'll see what all these languages have. But you should always remember that there is no problem, there is no project, and there is no product that can be entirely built with a single language. So people think you learned JavaScript. Yeah, that's it. I have learned JavaScript. There is nothing else for me to learn. Sorry guys, that's not how it works. Languages are there to solve specific problems. Languages are not skills, but rather they are tools. So there is no such thing as single language that solves everything. You have to learn a wide variety of languages, and you also need to work with wide variety of tools. But this might seem little daunting at first, but trust me, it's really a simple thing. Let's work our way through how these things go. So let's start with this step one, the most in starting point for many people, learning the basics. So many people might be wondering, you might know the basics already. Cool. Let's see what's there in basics first. So every programming language starts with the hello world example. So whenever you go to C, the first thing, it's a convention for programmers to write std out hello world to mark the start of their programming language. So let's say hello world in 600 programming languages. So this is a site that has over 600 hello world programs written in different languages. And you might not even heard about all of these languages. For example, C, you might have heard about this, the good old C, where you might be wondering, there are so many variants of C, like C OpenGL, C K&R, C Intuition, C Gem. This is the actual real world ecosystem when it comes to learning programming languages. You see, C as a system level language has many variants because it needs to run in many places. So let's go for some familiar faces. Let's see Python. So this is how Python looks like. We just write print hello world and it prints the value out. What about another thing, Java? PQRS. Let's see. Yeah. I'll share the website name out. Currently, I'm in the presentation mode, so I am unable to show the URL. I'll share the website out. So if you look at the code here, this is Java. So the Java world, we start with a class, we start with a main module, and then we are writing system.out.println hello world. Cool. This is how Java works. What about Kotlin? In Kotlin, there is no class, except instead we are writing function main, and we are writing println hello world. You might actually find a pattern here. So we actually are looking at 600 languages. Let's look at this language called L. I never heard about this language personally. So how this thing works is, there is a namespace kind of thing and a class here, and this end marks the end of the class. And here I am writing std out println hello world. So the pattern you are actually noticing here is, almost every language has a similar syntax. They have a way to print the data out, and they also have a set of rules you have to follow to call that data. So now here comes the interesting part, which means if you learn one language properly, then by default you are already good to learn any other 90% of the programming language easily, unless it is some really complex language that is written in some Arabic or some Chinese language. Other than that, I don't see any difficulty. If I learn Kotlin, I don't think learning L, the language I never heard about, to be complex because it follows the same syntax. Instead of brackets, they are using indentation, and instead of closing brackets, they are writing end, which makes learning language a much easier process. So now, like I told you, we should be in the mindset that programming languages are not skills. Programming languages are basically tools, which means you are a skilled worker. So you decide which tool you are going to use. And a skilled worker works with many different kinds of tools. So let's look at the language basics. C++. So this is creating a variable in C++. So this is how we create a variable. And you all know, basically, if you are from engineering, you would have learned about algebra. Don't tell me that you haven't learned algebra, then it's impossible to explain this concept. In algebra wise, we assign values to variables. So this is a letter variable that has a string a, and we also have float and double. So these are all variables, and each of them has a characteristic. So this letter is predefined using char, char, which means character, and area is basically float, which means it's going to have 2.23 decimal places along with it, and double basically means long decimal places. For example, value of pi 3.141536, it just keeps on going. So those kind of decimal places can use double. So this is how we create variables in C++. Now let's look at JavaScript. This is how we create variables in JavaScript. So I can either use const or let in JavaScript, but I don't have to specify if it's a character or float or double. So the idea here is, in C++, it's a static typed programming language, which means every time you create some variable and you want to store it in memory, you have to specify if it's character, float or double. So this is a statically typed language. But on JavaScript, however, I don't have to specify if it's a character, number or something else. So this makes code much more easier to write, because I can assign any value to any variable. In area, I can assign string and it will still work. And in D, I can literally do whatever I want. So this is JavaScript, and we also have Python. So Python takes it to the next level. According to Python, I don't even have to give any keywords like const or let. I can just assign a value to anything. So I can just say letter equal to take whatever the value is. It works. That's the beauty of Python. It takes the simplicity away completely, letting you write code more freely. So these three syntaxes basically does the same thing, creating some variables, except there are slight changes, language specific changes, I can say. So C++, the goal of C++ is creating system software, which means it needs more precise control of how memory should be allocated. That's why we have statically typed. And JavaScript is focused on web apps and building high level softwares. So it has enough tools to manage memory within itself. So we don't have to worry about creating, specifying if it's a character, number or integer. Likewise for Python. So Python and JavaScript are high level. So they have internal tools to manage the memory space. Now let's look at the fundamentals. So we saw how to create variables. Now let's look at fundamentals. So everyone knows that programming languages always have loops. There is no programming language that doesn't support loop. That basically makes the programming language pointless completely. So this is how a while loop works. So the idea behind while loop is, you write some condition, and based on that condition, if it satisfies, the statement will keep on executing. So this is the overall pseudocode. So how to use while loop? You have to be smart. So what you should do is, you should specify if I is lesser than 5, execute this statement. But at the end of the statement, you increase the value of I by 1, I plus 1. So if you do that, what will happen is, first it will start with I0, it will execute that statement and increases the value of I by 1. Then it will go and check for the condition, it's still lesser than 5. So till it reaches 5, it will keep on executing this condition. Then we have conditional statements. Again, this is also something without which there can be no programming language. So the idea behind the conditional statements is, if your program satisfies some condition, it will execute a code. If it executes some block, if it doesn't satisfy, it will execute another different block. So this lets you direct your computer to do something else if condition fails. Now let's look at Some examples, say you are building NASA's space rocket and it's basically attempting a launch, and if the launch detects a failure in the engine, it needs to terminate. It will terminate here. It will run this section of code. It will say, okay, some issue has been found, we should abort this launch. So it will try its best to land back into the planet. If else there is no condition found, then it will go and actually do a successful launch. On the high level, we are launching a rocket, but behind the scenes, it's a simple if condition at the end of the day. Then the third most important thing for any fundamental of programming languages, scoping. Scoping in basically the sense how long a variable is valid. So this is JavaScript code. Previously they are all not language specific. Now this is a language specific code. In JavaScript, I declare a variable here where side equal to 5 inside a function called area, which means I can access this variable side inside that function. I am free to access it. I can modify it whatever I want, I can do. But outside this function, I cannot access side. If I try to print out console.log side, it will print out undefined, which means you can declare variables, but these variables come with their own set of validity. After a while, these variables might become invalid. Let's see if cool. Variables might become invalid. So that's the idea of scope. So we learned three things here. How to declare variables. So we use C++, JavaScript and Python as example to see how to declare variables. And we learned about loops. Basically, loop is a way to execute a statement repeatedly until it satisfies a condition. We learned about conditional statements where you write a condition, and if the condition satisfies, it will go and execute a set of code. Finally, we also looked at scopes. So these scopes basically determine how long a variable is valid. So this basically completes the fundamentals for any programming language. So if you look at that, every programming language has this thing. So C++ has all of these concepts. JavaScript has also all of these concepts. So then why should you actually go ahead and learn a different unique language every time? Why don't we just use the same language for building everything? Why don't we just use JavaScript for sending rockets? Here is where the unique stuff comes in. So every language has something unique that sets it apart from other language. So first, JavaScript, the language I have been speaking about. So it's a single-threaded and non-blocking language. So the idea behind JavaScript is it's single-threaded. Secondly, if there is one action going on in your software, if there is some action happening, it won't block other actions. So say you are browsing your web, you are browsing Facebook. So you are actually chatting with 3 friends. So you are typing message for one friend and another friend messages you. So in that scenario, Facebook will show the notification immediately, even while you are on chat with another friend. How it works is, that's called non-blocking execution. While you are actually performing a task, the program will not block other actions. It will let other actions run through, which is why JavaScript is widely used for building web applications. So you go and interact with the web page, you do some work in the web page, while web page is also working. Web page is not blocked. Imagine going to a shopping mart and click on add to cart and the entire web freezes until your product actually adds to cart. That's how bad the experience will be, which is why we have a non-blocking language which lets you add items to a cart while keeping the entire website functional. Then Python. So honestly, there are so many advantages to Python, but the thing I would like to show here is how cool that language is. So say you want to reverse a string. This is the syntax for reversing that string. So look at that, you write a string and you write some weird colon -1 here that basically reverses the entire string. So Python is considered to be one of the simplest language, and it's also considered to be one of the coolest language, and it's also a confusing language because one developer will write some code in some weird way and other developers just come in and scratch their head. They're wondering what exactly does this thing do, but it's a fun language to work with. Then we have Go, the distributed systems favorite network specific language. So Go excels in concurrency. So concurrency is a concept where the program can execute out of order. So other languages, while they execute in the specific order that we say, this concurrent Go language can execute out of order. It can execute partial sections. It basically has every optimization needed in a system that manages a lot of network connections. So that's where Go comes in. Go does the concurrency part really well. Then we have my most favorite language, Rust. It has the best memory management in any language ever created. Hands down, it's the best. Trust me. And the story behind Rust is really interesting. So, Rust is a language invented by the people behind the Mozilla Firefox. And it was invented to build Firefox. So, the team behind Mozilla Firefox, the engineers who are building that browser, they are basically geniuses, best geniuses of our age. And they are also people who are working for a non-profit community despite their skills to make the web a better place. So I am not a Mozilla advocate. I just like their principles. So in the team Mozilla, they are actually building a browser. They are wondering, okay, we have people who are browsing 10-15 tabs at the same time. Honestly, I open like 30-35 tabs every time I am browsing the web. So they actually said, we need better memory management. So they had a lot of principles on how memory should be managed, how to manage, allocate variables, and how to destroy these variables. But they didn't have the language that could do their principles, that could implement their principles. Like I said, programming languages are tools, not skills. So what they decided is to build an awesome product, let's build a language first. That's how Rust actually came into being. So they built Rust, and using the Rust, they built Mozilla Firefox, and they open sourced Rust. So right now we are using Rust to build really awesome system software. Currently, there is a web framework called Actix, which is currently the fastest web framework in the world, which just destroys the benchmarks, and it's really cool, and it's built with Rust. So Firefox, by the way, is still better than Chrome when it comes to RAM usage. So you guys would have been using Chrome, might notice that after you open 10-15 tabs, Chrome just takes down the entire memory. It just chews through all the memory, while Firefox, it's really stable. So I am a big Firefox user, so I know how low the memory consumption is between Chrome and Firefox. And also Firefox is good at privacy if you care about it. And we are not here to speak about privacy. Let's continue on our journey to learn about rest of the programming languages. We are through the basics. We learned few important things about programming languages, and we also saw every language has some unique quirks. So there are languages which excel at memory management. There are languages which excel at concurrency. So that should conclude my talk technically if you look at that. But what we learned so far is basically tip of an iceberg. So we learned about programming language. We learned what each language does, but unfortunately that's not the entire programming paradigm, because learning a language basically gets you to the top of the tip. Behind the scenes there is a huge world that people are yet to see. So people go to the industry, they do some work, and in the beginning they say I learned a language, then I went to industry. After that it's completely blank screen. People don't know what's happening inside the industry. They are clueless. Okay, people, they learned a language, they went to industry, but I don't have no idea what's happening inside the industry. So let's demystify what's happening behind the scenes. After you learn a language, that's when you actually go to step 2. Step 2 is basically solving problems. So you spend time, you can learn language in many ways in today's scenario. So you can go and watch YouTube tutorials, you can go and watch purchase a Udemy course, you can subscribe to Pluralsight. There are so many ways to learn a language. And once you learn a language, the immediate next step that you should be doing is going out and solving problems. So the idea behind solving problems is two things. One, you get to use your problem solving skills, and secondly, you learn to think in that specific programming language. So there are sites that provide some really good resources on how to solve problems. So LeetCode is a site that has programming interview questions that are asked in top tech companies like Google, Facebook, Apple. So they collect interview questions from that sites and actually provide you the resource to learn such problem solving. And CodeChef is competitive programming. So they run online programming competitions. They provide complex problems and will challenge participants to solve. And HackerRank is basically a hiring platform. So most tech companies these days are subscribing to HackerRank to send out programming questions to their candidates. So you sit and solve the programming question in HackerRank. So the company gets to validate two things. They get to validate how skilled you are in that language. Second, how skilled you are when it comes to solving a problem. So problem solving skill is basically the first skill when it comes to using a programming language. Programming language is a tool. Take that away completely. Remove that from the skill type. The skill actually is problem solving. You have to develop that skill, and to develop that skill you actually have to spend a lot of time on these websites and solve a lot of problems. The goal is you get to think how to approach a problem, how to solve it. Second, you also familiarize yourself with the language a little more. And this is the first skill. Cool. Now let's look at step 3. We learned how to work with learn a programming language, how to solve problems with a programming language. What's next? We need to find something called the ecosystem. How many people have heard about programming ecosystems? Okay, don't unmute your microphone. Sorry, I asked a question. We'll have an ask me anything session after this where you can ask me these questions. So ecosystems are basically a group of things living together. So take a lake ecosystem. In a lake ecosystem, you have frogs, you have snakes, you have fishes, you have birds, all of them living together in a lake. One way or another, they depend on each other to live. So that's what we call an ecosystem. Likewise, every tech also has an ecosystem. For example, Apple has the best Apple ecosystem where you have a MacBook, you have a iPhone, you have iPads. All of these things work really well together. That's Apple ecosystem for you. But what about programming languages? Every programming language doesn't stand alone. Trust me, once you learn JavaScript, you are not going to build anything with JavaScript immediately. You actually have to get into the JavaScript ecosystem, and from there you will find the tools needed to build a programming language. So let's explore the ecosystem. Ecosystem usually is a group of tools that surround a programming language. It applies to every programming language. From here onwards, nothing is language specific. Everything I'm gonna say is applies to all the programming languages. So let's look at the first type of tools. So first we have libraries. So libraries are pre-created set of code. So say you have a binary search tree. You want to traverse the tree. Someone would have already built a tree traversal library. So the advantage of such library is that the code is already well tested, and the code is open source, which means you can go and read that code, and almost thousands of people will be using that code, which means you don't have to spend time writing your own tree traversal library. You can just get that existing library and start using that. Second is package manager. So once you start building an application, you will start installing lot of libraries. So to manage those libraries, there is also a tool that comes with every programming language, almost every programming language, and that tool is called a package manager. It will let you install and uninstall libraries easily to your project. So you will have to learn package managers. Finally, we have frameworks. So these frameworks are basically set of rules, and people still have a lot of questions on what exactly is a framework, what exactly is a library. So we'll demystify that thing in this talk. So let's start with libraries. So this is my most favorite library. It's called Lodash, and it's a JavaScript library, which means this library lives in the JavaScript ecosystem and can be used with JavaScript programming language. So what this library does is it has a huge set of reusable pieces of code. So say I want to find difference between two arrays. So there is one element difference between them. So I just have to write Lodash underscore dot difference. It will immediately find that difference. And it also has inbuilt methods that use to find index, and it also has join lost. You can pretty much imagine anything. So Lodash is a utility library that has all the pieces of code required to solve most common programming problems. So this is something that's widely used by JavaScript developers when in their real day-to-day work, because imagine you are building a huge product and you're stuck rewriting common logic. You are stuck rewriting finding the index of an element in an array of object. So in that scenario, Lodash basically simplifies everything for you. It's a developer friendly library. Then we have something called PyTorch. Now this is a Python library. So the idea behind PyTorch is, this is built by Facebook, by the way. Facebook built PyTorch just to let others use machine learning. So the idea behind PyTorch is, it has a collection of tools written for Python programming language, and these tools can work on large set of data, and they can generate models, machine learning models. So PyTorch has its own ecosystem inside. So it has a set of models where doctors, engineers, they can collect data and they can publish model. For example, you have an autonomous car driving, self-driving car. You create a model for that car. That model automatically detects all the passengers, people who are outside the vehicle, vehicles that are coming in from the back, and it automatically reads the traffic signals, road signals. So you basically build a model. So here you can see all the models that are available, built by the community, PyTorch community. So these people basically built all these models, and they have published it in PyTorch so that others can easily come and read this model and use it. So this is how the open source community works, and this is how a library looks like. So this is a library built by Facebook, and there are like millions of libraries that does some specific piece of work. And yeah, this is my personal favorite, TensorFlow. And this is a library that works in multiple languages. So TensorFlow works in Python, JavaScript, Rust. So the goal is, it provides you a easy to use way to access machine learning platforms. So TensorFlow has inbuilt machine learning methods. For example, it all linear regressions and predictions. It has all the logic inbuilt. You just have to pass data to TensorFlow, and TensorFlow will automatically use these machine learning methods to provide the desired output, which means you don't have to write any of the complex machine learning tools. You just have to learn which machine learning algorithm you want to use and how to use that with TensorFlow, and TensorFlow will take care of using those models in your specific project. This led to rise of lot of AI and data science enabled startups. So almost all the machine learning startups, basically startups are places where there are only few developers. They use these open source tools like PyTorch and TensorFlow, these open source libraries, to build their own machine learning models. So we have a revolution going on because large tech companies with hundreds of engineers, they are open sourcing their libraries. The pieces of code they built, they are open sourced, and we have a growing ecosystem. Then we have package managers. So for package managers, I am taking JavaScript ecosystem as example. So they have a package manager called npm. So the idea behind this npm package manager is, there are tons of libraries out there. So this is npm site. You can see there are lots of libraries for front-end development, back-end development, CLI, CSS, coverage, mobile application development, frameworks, robotics, you name it, there's a library for everything. There's also a math specific category. So like I said, Lodash, the library that which we just looked at, this is Lodash, and this is how you install Lodash with npm. So all these libraries are there, and npm provides a way to easily install and uninstall these libraries. So say I have front-end requirement, I want to have a front-end library, I want to install Bootstrap to my project. So what I'll do is, I'll create a node project, then I just run npm I bootstrap. Now this will automatically bring all the Bootstrap code into my current project, and if I want to remove Bootstrap, all I have to do is npm uninstall Bootstrap. This will uninstall Bootstrap, so I don't have to go and work on managing this dependency. So I can just focus on writing my code, and whenever I need a library, I'll just do npm install. It will fetch that library into my JavaScript project. So likewise, this is a package manager for JavaScript. For Python, we have pip, pip, that's for Python. In Rust, we have Cargo. In Android, we have Maven, Gradle. So every language and every programming ecosystem has its own package manager. You just have to go and learn how to use these package managers and how to install those libraries into your projects. Then the most important part, framework. So what exactly is a framework? This is a question I had when I finished college. because I learned programming language. I learned there are libraries and all. But what makes a framework? How is a framework different from library? Because library is basically a piece of reusable code that is built by some other guy, which I can install and use in my project. Cool. Framework is also similar to like that. I can install a framework using package manager and I can start using it. But here's where framework actually differs. So the idea is framework not only gives you a piece of code, it will also give you a set of rules on how you should write code. So currently the presentation that you guys are looking at right now, it's actually built using a presentation framework. It's completely coded. So let me also show you guys the code. So it's built using HTML and a presentation framework called Reveal.js. So this is my current folder structure. So on my right side, I have a list of folders and a list of files. And what this framework told me is, if I want to build a presentation like this, then this is how you should write. You should write everything inside a section tag. And you should write the text inside div tag with fragment class name. So it told me that I need to follow all these rules if I am actually going to build this presentation. Then that's what a framework is. A framework not only provides you a set of programming tools, but it also tells you how to write that code. You have to follow their rule if you actually want to build something out of that framework. Now this makes some things simple. For example, the Android ecosystem. So we have Java and Kotlin as the programming languages for building Android apps. But what Google did is they built an entire integrated development environment for Android programming. So if you look at their first app creation concept, what they will do is they will ask you to create an Android project. This Android project basically is a new framework. What this Android project does is it asks you what you want to name your project, what's your package name going to be, and what kind of programming language you want. And based on your results, it basically creates a folder. Just like how I have a folder here with set of files and folders inside, and it also creates some folders. And these folders are basically rules defined by that specific framework. So according to them, if you want to create a new activity, you should go inside app, Java and main activity file, and you have to write your code here inside this class. Let me zoom that in. So you have to write your code inside this class. Then only your Android application will start that activity. So that's the rule they give you. And the reason why they have these strict rules is because, say you are working in an environment with 50 other developers. So trust me, there are teams with thousands of developers. So one day you are sitting in your work and someone walks into you and asks, we want to change our main activity in our Android app. Can you do that? So if there is no framework, which means anyone can write a main activity anywhere, which means you will be spending 3-4 days just looking where the main activity is. But since everything is inside a framework now, if someone wants to write a main activity, they have to go into my app directory, they have to go to this Java directory, and they have to go to main activity.java to actually write that activity code, which means in a few seconds you just go and find that code and you can start working on changing that code. So this is where frameworks come in. So programming is basically a social activity. Trust me, it's not something you just do on a computer. Programming is basically stuff you do with other developers. You work with other people, and based on their work, you also build more modules that work well with their set of tools. Now this is the framework part. So these three things basically constitute the language ecosystem. Libraries, which are reusable set of code, package managers, which are basically tools that lets you install or uninstall libraries, then frameworks, basically collection of libraries and rules on how you should write your language so that other people can easily understand, and you can also build applications faster by following these rules. So this constitutes a programming ecosystem. This is something you should know after you learn a language. This is your third step. After you learn to solve problems, you go and learn an ecosystem for that specific language. In future, no matter what language comes in, it always has these three things, which means you know what you are supposed to learn immediately. Next, step 4. Now things are going to be really interesting here. Step 4 is you need to learn to use GitHub. So GitHub is basically an open source tool that focuses on uh, making your code accessible to other developers. So if you look at GitHub, let me open up GitHub page and let me open some pages. So here we have an explore section, and this is also this is my personal GitHub profile. You can see I have built a set of tools, and if people like my tools, they will add stars and they will create a copy for themselves. So this is how GitHub works. It's like a social networking platform but for developers. Right now 156 people actually liked my library responsive dimensions, so they have given stars, and 22 people have copied it. Basically they have copied this library and they are actually making some improvements on their own. And if I go inside, I can see that this library also has a documentation on how to use this library, and this is the source code of this library. So you can literally go in and read what's inside this library. So this is how I have built this library. Basically it's a collection of mathematical functions that calculates the device height and width to make a given dimension responsive, which means you can technically go and read how other people code. And trust me, that's really awesome, because imagine you are working in a machine learning product. So you actually want to learn how the industry professionals do machine learning. So what you should do is you can just go and find their GitHub profile, and there you will see all of their code, open source code, and you can go and read them. You learn a lot of stuff. Secondly, you also get to learn all the tricks they are using, and you get to use their code in your actual project. And finally you get to publish your own code. So this also creates a reputation for you. If you have a really good GitHub profile, other hiring people or other senior developers, they prefer to see your GitHub profile instead of actually sitting in an interview with you. Because once they see your GitHub profile and realize, okay, this guy has built a lot of cool stuff with this programming languages, maybe we should give him a chance. That creates a really good look for you even before you walk into an interview. Then the rest of the interview process will be really positive, because that guy knows that you are really good at programming and you are really good at using GitHub. And as far as teams go, almost everyone uses GitHub. NASA's rocket launch program, their source code and all are completely written in GitHub. Tesla, you name a tech company, they are probably using GitHub to store their code. And they will be private until they realize they can open source the code out. For example, PyTorch. This PyTorch library was built by Facebook, and it was in GitHub, hidden in a private repository. And one day Facebook realized we are using this library a lot, really lot, and it will be really useful for our programming community. So what they decided is one fine day they open sourced it. So you can go to GitHub, find PyTorch, you can literally see all the code that's written inside PyTorch, and you can also use PyTorch for your personal gain. This is where things get interesting. You can contribute to PyTorch if you feel there is a feature that would be really good. So what you can do is you can go inside that PyTorch repository, you can write that feature, and you can send a pull request to Facebook developers. So someone from their team will come and see your code and be like, okay, this guy is smart, this feature really works. So they will add that feature and you become a contributor to that project. So here if you look at contributors list for my repository, you will find two contributors. So first is me, I was the guy who created this project, and then I had someone else who come in and built one small feature for me. So now he is a contributor to this repository. Likewise, the amount of open source contributions you have add up to your profile if you are looking for a job, and it's also a really fun process. It's it creates a lot of good vibe when you are coding for the community. So learning GitHub is step 4. Now to step 5. You have to join a community. This is the interesting part. So like I told you, there is a site called GitHub where people come and code together. So there are people who are building applications, and there are people who share their code to the world, which means programmers are friendly human beings, which means they like to gather around, which means again there are programming communities. So a good example is Chennai Geeks. So I am from Chennai. This is one of the most famous programming community in Chennai called Chennai Geeks. It's a Facebook group. So the idea behind Chennai Geeks is they bring developers together. So developers from different platforms, they bring all those developers together and they conduct tech meetups. So you can see the cover picture, these are all people from tech, and there are a lot of conversations going on programming related stuff. For example, Mr. Dore actually asked a question here: do you think people good at math do well in programming? If yes, why? Why not? So this sparked some interesting discussions, and you can also find some really good resources in this Facebook group. uh, this is me promoting my stream, and we also have people who do online meetings in this lockdown to plan upcoming meetings and all. So this is a really fun place. So you become a developer, you get to meet interesting people, and you get to do fun stuff with them. We go on a lot of meetups, we arrange a lot of tech events, and trust me, tech is basically one of the top most paid sector out there, which means the meetups and the workshops we do will be kick-ass, will be really awesome. Then we have React.js Bangalore. So people from Bangalore, there is a React.js community where React developers actually meet up and discuss some interesting stuff. So this is their site, reactjsbangalore.com. You can go and find their activity. They are active on Twitter, YouTube, Slack. Another community is IoT Geeks. So this is my personal favorite. So the idea behind IoT Geeks is it's a programming community focused on IoT stuff. So this IoT community has a makerspace where they have 3D printers, smart devices, and they invite people over to come in and work on these kind of tools. This is completely run by self-motivated individuals who want to do good for their community by letting others use a piece of their equipment to learn how to build stuff and build actual interesting stuff afterwards. This is IoT Geeks community. And some communities go global. So this is developer circles from Facebook. So you can see my t-shirt, developer circles. They provide a lot of swag out there. So developer circles is a global community that is built and managed by Facebook. So if you go to developer circles sites on Facebook, you will see that it has so many countries. So Atlanta, Resite, so many cities. Not now Facebook. Yeah. So this is a global developer community spanning multiple regions across the world. So Facebook is the organization who is maintaining this developer community, and we have developer communities all over India. We have Facebook developer community for Chennai, Bangalore, Pune, you name a city, major city, metro city, there will be a Facebook developer circle there. So the Facebook developer circle, people come in and teach free stuff, free Facebook based libraries. So I have actually teach React, PyTorch to other people. We do it for free, basically to let beginners learn, and we also share interesting ideas where you can meet people. And these kind of communities are also good places for you to find your next job, because industry experts come in, and if they find you interesting, if they find your work interesting, they will actually hire you into your current work environment. A really good fun fact. So the company I'm working for, PicureTrail, they actually found me in one of these meetups, in Facebook developer circle meetups. That's how I actually got my job. So community is really important. You have to find and join a suitable community. Every language has its community, and there are also general tech communities which focus on any set of languages. Now time for step 6. Build something to showcase. Now you have learned a language, you have learned some really interesting stuff. This is the time where you actually go and build stuff to showcase to the world. So a guy called Dan Abramov, he built Redux, a tool, and he showcased it to the world, and he is now part of Facebook. He is working on Facebook and is working in the React core team, and Facebook hired him because they liked his work. Likewise, you have to build stuff and you have to showcase it to the world. Tell everyone saying that I have built this cool stuff, you might want to check out. And you can, and once you build this cool stuff, ideally the step 7 is you have to write about your experience. So you built something really nice, you want to share with the community, you can go and write about it. There are a lot of tech blogs out there. You can write in Medium, you can write in Hashnode. There's also a site called dev.to where you can go and write programming blogs. So writing is really important once you start building some cool stuff with the languages you just learned. Once you start writing, the next step is applying to tech conferences. So these tech conferences are all happening throughout the world across different regions. What they do is they invite people who have built some awesome thing. and they will arrange a huge party for the developers. Trust me, it will go for 3 or 4 days. One common tech conference that I can recommend is Apple's developer conference, Worldwide Developer Conference, WWDC. That tech conference has two things. Apple showcases their products, they have new iPhones and MacBooks, and they conduct workshops where they invite industry professionals, people who are really good at programming language, and teach others how to do advanced programming principles. And they also invite people who have innovated a lot. For example, Bethesda Games came in for the iPad introduction, where they showcased their iPad game, which previously was a console game, which was now running in iPad. They showcased it. So that's how these conferences work. They become a stage for developers who have done some really awesome work in their field. Then step 9. This is the most important step. Even if you skip many of the previous steps, you should do the step where you have to teach new learners. Personally, I believe it's my duty to teach people who walk into tech, which is why I'm also taking this time to spend 1 hour teaching you guys how to learn a language. So after you learn a language, the best way to become more well versed in that language and to give back to the community is you have to teach others. So you learned everything for free, unless you paid for a Udemy course. But other than that, most of the stuff are open source, available on GitHub, available on the website. You just go and learn it for free, which means you should also give it away for free. Let others, your juniors, your family members, your new cousins who are new to programming language, you just teach programming to them. Teach whatever you know, whatever cool stuff you know, teach it to them. They might build something really nice. And the reason behind that thing is you taught them. It's just good karma and spreading some good vibes throughout the community. That's step 9. Step 10. This is basically concludes our talk. Build your own community. So this is the end stage for every program developer. Basically, you joined a community, you learned a lot from the community, you taught people. Next, you create your own community. You arrange meetups, you arrange tech conferences, you become a well-known person. If someone says, I want to learn about Rust, you can say, join the community by that person. He has been doing a lot of excellent work. So this is how programming becomes a really fun experience. Other than getting a job, programming lets you meet interesting people. It lets you showcase your work. It lets you build amazing stuff, teach people, and finally create a small gathering of people, like-minded people, that actually does some awesome stuff for the rest of the world. So this concludes my talk on how to learn a programming language. Hope it was really useful to you all, and really thanks for sitting through this 1 hour to actually listen to this program. I'll be sharing this entire slide through mail, whatever link it is, Ram. So share this slide. I'll give the link to you afterwards, and I'll also share all the interesting stuff. As promised, at the end of the talk, I actually promised to do an Ask Me Anything session where you guys can ask questions, and I'll be answering those questions. So I hope Ram has shortlisted some questions for me. Ram, are you there? Yeah, can you? Cool. Send the questions. Cool. So like I told you, NPM is a place where you build libraries. Okay, someone turned on annotations. Just a second. Let me turn off annotation. Yeah. So NPM is a place. This is for JavaScript. So people who build these tools, they also show how to publish libraries. So we just have to search for NPM publish, and they have a documentation page where they will teach you how to write and publish a library. Trust me, if you want anything, you can simply Google that. So this is for NPM, JavaScript based libraries. If you want to publish library for Python, you just have to Google how can I publish a library for Python using pip or poet, that specific package manager, and within a few seconds you will find a page. So say publish pip package. So using that, there are already Medium blogs how to upload your Python package to PyPy. You just have to follow these documentations. The reason why I am confident that you can learn everything on your own is because there are people out there sharing their skills, sharing their expertise with the rest of the world. So making sure uh, the process of creating a library, creating any language is really simplified. Next question, Ram. I see no problem with being perfect with one programming language. To be honest, guys, programming language is a tool. Like I said, if you know one language really well, that's really good. But what becomes necessary is you should be willing to learn another language. You shouldn't refuse to learn another language. That's where things get bad. If you're an expert in Java, you know Java really well, you are building some amazing stuff with Java, all thumbs up, you're good to go. But you come across a project where you actually need to work with Python, you have to do some Python related work, then you should be willing to learn that language. You should be open minded and spend some time, learn that language, and quickly build stuff with that language. That doesn't mean you hate Java. That just means you are focused on solving that problem. You are open to learn anything. Then you can go back to your Java work. And if your workplace requires you to work in different language than your favorite language, then you are free to go and find a different job. That's completely up to your choice. But what I suggest is be open minded. Be open minded to learn anything. Any other questions, Ram? Okay, cool. Actually, my. Mm, wait. Just ask your question in the chat. Ram will pass the question to me. Yes, Ram. I couldn't hear. How could I do what? How to do? Uh, okay, so you want to learn how to do some stuff in programming. Just a second. My system is running out of charge. Let me connect it to a charging outlet. Yep, I have connected it to the outlet. Great. So your question is, you learned some mathematical stuff. I'm really want to implement those things in programming, and how should I go about implementing it? So here is the fun part. So there is this library called NumPy, NumPy, which is short for number Python. So this is a library focused on implementing scientific computing. So with NumPy, you can actually do algebra, Fourier transforms, random numbers. So these kind of stuff. So if you're really good in math, if you're really good at engineering and science stuff, you can actually go to NumPy and go to their getting started site where they have a tutorial link, NumPy tutorial. Trust me, these kind of mathematical libraries will have a lot of reading you have to do, and you also have to learn a specific language for that. In NumPy case, you have to learn Python, and you have to install NumPy into your Python project to start using it. But remember that dialogue from Doctor Strange, where Strange asks the Ancient One, how do I get from here to there? How do I become someone like Ancient One? And Ancient One replies saying, how you go from learning about nerves to putting an entire spine piece by piece. So the idea is you have to spend years in learning and hard work. So luckily programming is not that difficult. Programming is not difficult as surgery. You just have to put in few months of effort to learn a specific thing, and you will be really good at it. Next question, guys. Is it necessary to learn C++ to learn Java? Trust me, every programming language is independent. You don't have to learn a language first to learn any other language. You can learn any language anytime. Basically, you just have to follow how the programming principles. At the beginning, I told you, right, how to write loops, conditional statements, variables. You have to learn those things in that specific language. Says there is no requirement to learn any other language before learning a new language. Next question. Best way to learn a framework. Let me show you a framework that I like. It's called React Native. So the idea behind React Native is using JavaScript to build real mobile applications. And I actually wrote many part of their documentation. So if you go to this React Native repository, you will find that I actually wrote certain pieces of this document. And this framework already has a get started page. So every framework, people who build this framework, they spend a lot of time in writing a getting started link where they will write about how to quickly build something with this framework. So if you follow this thing, they will specify that these are all the things you need, and they will provide you the code. So to use React Native, we need to import React from React library. I have to import text and view from React Native. Then I can build a view like this. Try editing me. So this is the text. I can actually edit. I can write something here. Say hello world, and it immediately reflects here. It changes to hello world. So to learn a framework, first thing is you have to go through their actual documentation to see what this framework is, what it does. Then second thing is you can find some tutorial videos on YouTube, or you can find some interesting blogs on Medium. You can read them. Or if you want to take the quickest approach, you can find one of the most popular course in Udemy or some course provider who already has some tutorial videos built for that framework. So you can jumpstart your development and you can move ahead in building apps with that framework. This is standard for any framework. You learn a language first and you follow these steps to learn that specific framework. Next question, guys. I'll ask. Now, this is a really interesting question. So the hardest thing about working in a computer programmer is managing other people. Trust me, managing other people is the hardest part. Programming is really easy. When they ask you some problems, you can just think through and come up with a solution for that problem. But when it comes to people, project managers, your teammates, so they are all other human beings, which means you have to communicate your thoughts properly. If you don't communicate your thoughts properly, that becomes a huge burden on them and on you afterwards in your career. So software engineering is 50% coding, 50% interacting with other people, which means you should be a really good communicator. Interesting question. Next. Lodash is currently built and implemented for JavaScript alone. So unfortunately, we can't use it for any other programming languages. So if you want, you can actually start implementing Lodash in your favorite language. There are already many attempts in writing Lodash for Python and Rust. You can join one of those communities to bring Lodash into that language. Two more questions. It's really going really interestingly. Let's finish with two more questions. Ram? Of course, you are free to build your own OS. You know the guy who built Linus Torvalds. He built that OS for fun. Now it's become a gold standard in computing. Everyone's using Linux. They are building new distros on top of existing Linux kernel. If you Google how to build a OS, there is actually a really good set of instructions that tell you how to build a OS. But it comes with a set of requirements. You should be really good in hardware. You should be really good in networking. You should be familiar with building systems, programming languages. So difficult, takes time, but yeah, you're free to build your own OS. Next, last, final question. Flutter is better than Node.js. How? Okay. Trust me, Flutter is a completely different category. Node.js is a different category. Node.js is a server runtime for JavaScript, where you write JavaScript code and you execute on this server. It's completely different. And Flutter is a mobile application development framework built by Google using Dart language. So Flutter is focused on building mobile apps, the UI that people interact with. Node.js, however, is focused on building servers. Basically, you build your mobile app. Your mobile app needs to communicate to a server. That server is going to be built with Node.js. So in an ideal term, what question you should have asked is Flutter better than React Native, a similar framework, or Android or native iOS development? So these are all tools that are used for building mobile apps. Node.js is a completely different category. So if you ask me that way, if Flutter is better than Android, iOS, or React Native based environment, I'd say it's completely subjective, not objective. I cannot say it's best. It's best for certain people. Say you have a team of JavaScript developers who you have like 10 JavaScript developers in your team and you want to build a mobile app, you will go with React Native, not Flutter, because Flutter is written using Dart, a different language. So React Native is the ideal choice for that team. And if you have a team of native developers, people who know Java or Swift programming language, then native iOS and Android development becomes the choice for you. And if you are having a team of people who actually know Dart, or they are people willing to learn Dart and build applications with Flutter, then again Flutter becomes a choice for that specific team. It's not something you take as an individual, you actually take these decisions as a team, because you are building products with other people. Like I said, 50% coding, 50% working with other team. So this is how you choose the required stack. Okay guys, so it's been a really interesting time doing this session with everyone. A big thanks to the IEEE BEC community for arranging this talk. So this is my yeah. Hi sir. Yeah. That's really happy to hear, sir. Your belief is absolutely right. Thanks a lot, sir. And sure, after this lockdown, I'll walk in one to your campus. Okay, guys. I really enjoyed your questions. And if you want to reach out to me personally, this is my site, dannyakash.com, where you can find my social links. I'm really active on Twitter and Instagram. So you can message me there. You can tweet to me. You can ask your questions. Whenever I get time, I promise I'll get back to you. Cool. Thanks, Ram. So, anything you want to share to the participants? I think you can mail those feedbacks to me. I'll be happy to read them. Okay, guys, this is Danny signing off today. Hope. Thanks, bro. Thanks, bro. And I'm actually hoping to see all of you become really good programmers in the future. Really, thanks, guys. Bye.